the terror event that changed the course of European domestic security policy. A devastating attack which hit underground trains and buses. It was both bold and brilliant in its execution. The official narrative is that of 4 radical British Muslims whose perfectly planned and run operation claimed the lives of some 52 innocent victims. In 2010, while compiling an annual strategic threat assessment, South Yorkshire Police's principal intelligence analyst Tony Farrell learned that the government narrative of Islamic extremists carrying out the attacks of both 9/11 and 7/7 was a lie, perpetrated by a mainstream media code of silence and complicit government officials, a stance which ultimately led to his dismissal. Infowars.com had a chance to speak with Mr. Farrell at a recent Employment Tribunal appeal hearing in London, where he sheds additional light on his pending case.
My name's Tony Farrell. I work for South Yorkshire, or used to work for South Yorkshire Police as the principal intelligence analyst. I've worked for them for 17 years, and in September 2010, following a stance in July 2010 on the 5th anniversary of the London bombings, I made a stance that led to my dismissal. My stance was, when tasked to do a strategic threat assessment, which incorporated, amongst other things, the threat from counter-terrorism, in the light of the realisation that 9/11 and 7/7 were not as the government narratives would have us believe, I no longer was able to say that the threat was coming from Islamic extremism, as the government rhetoric was saying at that point, and my managers in South Yorkshire Police wanted me to say. I felt that would be discriminatory against the Muslim communities in South Yorkshire and further afield. And I went to my boss, alerting him to the fact that there is all sorts of information available in open source, including the work that Alex Jones had done to expose this at the time. That was influential indeed. And they clamped down on me, refused to contemplate the notion of the threat being anything other than Islamic extremism, saying, you and I, Tony, are just the government foot soldiers. You'll never get the government to tell the truth. So they weren't saying you're wrong, Tony. They were just saying go along with the lie and say that the threat's from Islamic terrorism. They tried to get me down to occupational health. Now, for a day I went along with it, but on the 8th of July I went into work, and that was the day of the assignment, and the realisation had only happened about a week or 2 before this. I'd given them a red alert, they ignored it, they were cornering me. Now I felt as though now I either had to lie and say that the threat was something that my analysis pointed towards was different. I couldn't lie in that situation, the professional standards for honesty, integrity, etc. So at that point, on the morning of the 8th of July, I made an absurd strategic threat assessment matrix, because I was cornered into lying, and I thrust a threat assessment matrix in front of the boss saying 9/11 truth, 7/7 truth, and other aspects of criminality that South Yorkshire Police might be interested in. I just put as irrelevant and scored it up. It was ludicrous, but it was to reflect the absurdity of the situation that were putting me into and cornering me into lying, and lying against the Muslim population in the United Kingdom, where in the light of the government's contest strategy, the government counter-terrorism strategy, rich picture, the police forces in England and Wales and the communities were being encouraged to collect intelligence on Muslims, targeting mosques, targeting universities. Now that's all well and good if there is a threat there, but in the light of 9/11 and 7/7 and other miscarriages of justice that I was alert to at that point, I thought, well, without proofs, I can't say that. That is really being discriminatory to my Muslim brothers and sisters. And the threat almost certainly was coming from within, in whatever capacity. Now, I didn't know clearly how it had been perpetrated, which agents of the state, but what I did know for certain was that the government narrative, the 9/11 Commission report, and the Home Office anonymous document, official document, was just a pack of lies. No other word for it. It was just ludicrous. So in the light of that, I made the stance, knowing full well that it's likely to end in tears. It's likely to end in dismissal. But my conscience said, take it, Tony, rather than prostitute yourself. So they wanted to sort of treat it as if I was insane. So they tried to cart me off to occupational health. At first I resisted, but I did go to occupational health, came back with a clean bill of health. I then went to a dismissal hearing in September, and I challenged them to do something about this and let me give the strategic assessment fully to source everything up, to say why I was more than justified in doing what I did. They didn't want to know and said, your beliefs may well be correct. You've had exemplary record for South Yorkshire Police, excellent work, but it's incompatible with where we are at the moment. So it's a very sad occasion, we're sacking you. By the way, you can appeal. I did appeal to the police authority, who just rubber stamped the deal and said Tony Farrell's views, this was a councillor, Tony Farrell's views are outlandish. Nobody investigated it, outlandish. So then it went into a more formal footing, employment tribunal. I sought my legal advice and they said best to argue on a discrimination on grounds of your religious philosophical beliefs, which is an unusual thing to do. Unfortunately for me, I went with it because I had said that, look, if you're asking me what a threat is, it's a satanic New World Order. But I would have never have said that had I not disbelieved 9/11 and 7/7. And they said, that's religious philosophical to some degree. So I was steered down that route, and we had the pre-hearing in the tribunal to discuss whether that belief was a philosophical belief, because if it was, it would have been protected. But the judge, in a way correctly, diagnosed it as, well, look, that wasn't the cause of the blockage. It was the fact that 9/11, he disbelieved 9/11, he disbelieved 7/7 based on empirical data rather than a philosophical belief. Right? So it was dismissed on those grounds. It left me an unfair dismissal. Could they have redeployed? Was it reasonable to sack me? And in September, 3 days in September 2011, in a hearing with Ian O'Crane representing me as a lay representative, I'd run out of all resources to have legal representation. I lost an unfair dismissal hearing as well. Now we have a course for appeal. We did appeal, and the judge dismissed it with no reasonable prospects of success. But there is a rule in the Employment Appeal Tribunal which we've taken advantage of to get us to court today. So sat ex parte, on my own in front of the judge, South Yorkshire Police not present, the argument was really to say I was making, it wasn't a religious belief, it was a Public Interest Disclosure Act. It was a protected disclosure. I, as the intelligence analyst, had been tasked to do the analysis, and they shouldn't have sacked me just because they didn't like the analysis. I was speaking truth to power. Right? Not the truth that they wanted me to hear, they're enabling the one truth, but what I considered as the analyst, being tasked to do the threat assessment, as the truth, to the best of my knowledge. So I put an inference on it. I didn't say it was dead certain. I said the inference being that it was almost certainly an inside job, 95% in the UK, 99% in America with the 9/11. So I also said that the matrix system of threat assessment, and my first degree is statistics, was a ludicrous attempt by the government, National Police Improvement Agency, to almost mind control and dumb down thinking, criminal intelligence analysis thinking, on looking at threat. Why would they do that? Well, the construct that they had within the matrix was artificial and deliberately heightened the fear coming from Islamic extremism and the terror attack. So JTAC, Joint Terrorist Analysis Centre, always put out the threat levels as almost imminent, high or severe. Now, in a crude scoring system, that had to be transferred locally, irrespective of what intelligence you had locally. And potentially the harm a terrorist act could do, well, it's how far will the imagination stretch? You know, it could be anything. So the consequence, the harm, the probability, all meant that resources were being allocated to unaccountable resources within Special Branch and within MI5, right? But without the intelligence and the evidence to back it up. And in the light of 9/11, 7/7, not squaring with the official accounts, I felt had to make a stance on the strategic threat assessment. Said it was totally ludicrous. I'd always thought that anyway, but in the light of that, I thought enough no more, that's where I make the stance on the strategic threat. Now, that was why I was in the court today, arguing that it wasn't really a religious philosophical belief. We agree with that. There's no point of issue with the police. You know, there's no facts that we differ on, other than we are saying that as an analyst I was making a protected disclosure. I was doing my job. I had a duty of care to present the truth. Now, they didn't have to accept the truth, but just because they didn't like the analysis on the threat, was it reasonable for them to dismiss me? Now, if you're suppressing strategic analysis in that way, because an intelligence analysis is an evolving process whereby you give your intelligence and your intelligence officer opposite may not agree with you, but you start to converge to get to the truth, and new information comes to light, and hopefully you converge on that truth. So in doing my job as an intelligence analyst, I was sacked for telling what my analysis was. Now, I stand by that analysis exactly now. 18 months down the line, nothing has come to light which remotely challenges the fact that I was right, you know, that I erred in what I did. So I'm pleased with what I've done. I had a duty of care. I followed through with my conscience, and sadly I've ended up getting dismissed and on the verge of bankruptcy. But the reason why I'm doing this is not for compensation. It's that I believe it's in the public interest for this case to keep on going. Now, the judge today has dismissed it, right? The Employment Appeal Tribunal saying no, South Yorkshire Police had reasonable, that behaved reasonably in dismissing me, and that as a point of law we can't really challenge that. However, he's not slammed the door down, not completely. Therefore, there is a court of appeal. So now it's getting into a quite high area now, whereby under the public interest disclosure, because I wasn't legally represented at the unfair hearing, right, we never cited the Public Interest Disclosure Act. Ian Crane, who represented me in September, wasn't a trained lawyer, but to all intents and purposes, he was arguing that I was making a protected disclosure, and I shouldn't be dismissed, especially when I'm the analyst assessing the threat. If analysis is the very product, strategic threat analysis, that should keep chief constables awake at night, and the fact that I was giving them unpalatable news, it was only doing my job. Why should you be sacked? Especially as there's no end of evidence that was presented today on 7/7 analysis and on all the people who've written widely on 9/11. It's not as if I'm a lone nut. There are serious academic, weighty people now.
Are you bound to an oath when you take the job with the police?
I sign an Official Secrets Act. But
are you bound to an oath to protect the public interest?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You're a public servant and you have a duty of care. Yeah. And it's the duty of care that really, compel me to speak truthfully on this matter. It wasn't a trivial issue that we could sidestep round. I did my job as the principal intelligence analyst, and I have no regrets no matter what happens. Now we have, of course, as I say, to the High Court. But what I need is to expose this so that we can start to demonstrate equality of arms. In other words, it's time now the public woke up to this, because it's dangerous if we don't. And that if I can get that public support behind me, I mean, I've not got bad support in the truth movement, but it's not as high profile as it needs to be by the time I get to High Court. But interestingly, the judge has left it open, so it's not inconceivable that the analysis that is available that completely discredits 9/11 and 7/7 could be actually tested in a court. And that's all we can hope for. Whether we will ever get there is another matter. But I'm committed to keep on trying until I drop or win, and irrespective of the consequences. It's that important from a public interest perspective. And I was fortunate enough to land on last week a very interesting character, a QC Michael Shrimpton, who has appeared on the Alex Jones show in an interview, and is his secondary discipline, besides being a barrister, is a strategic intelligence analyst at the highest levels. So he has contacts in America, in the CIA, and in the British intelligence, in MI5, MI6, but he himself is saying there is something radically wrong here. Now, you need his views don't exactly square with my views, but there's enough commonality, and his respect for the intelligence analysis function and his appreciation of it was ample for him to portray that importance of that function in front of a judge, because in a way that's what he is, an intelligence analyst. So it was very helpful to have him come in at the 11th hour, because up until last week I was doing this myself and I would have stood no chance, but at least there was a very strong, healthy, high quality debate on the legal side this morning.
Public record.
And it's on the public record.